Oftentimes, unknowingly, we will project problems into our future just by speaking about them, which doesn't make any sense logically, but it's not about logic, it's about emotion.
You're listening to Stories from the Top, an inside guide to better business development. We are here once again with Dennis Carroll, the founder of Premier NLP Life Coaching. Dennis, thanks again for coming back. Today, we're going to dive into NLP and just learn a little bit more what that is, Neuro-Linguistic programming. Why don't you start off by just giving us a brief intro to what NLP is to you, at least?
Well, happy to be here. Thanks for having me back. NLP, and it's a methodology of identifying the structure of communication primarily. I mean, there's a lot more to it. There's components to it, but neuro, right, being the brain, linguistics, the words we use, and programming. So literally, we're programming our subconscious the way we speak and the way we think. And oftentimes, unknowingly, we will project problems into our future just by speaking about them. And there's things in linguistics known as universals, like with nobody, no one, everyone, always, never. And, you know, I heard somebody the other day, we were actually at a networking group, and a gentleman asked him to sign in, and he goes, I always forget to do that. Well, he's literally programming himself to forget to do that. So that if that was a problem, it's not a big problem, right? But if it was, that problem would be projected into his future until he starts talking about it differently. And literally, that's sometimes all you have to do is change the way you talk about something to change the situation, to project a solution into your future versus projecting a problem into your future. So, for instance, you could say, up to this point, I have forgotten to do that. But now that I'm aware I had been forgetting, right, past tense, I'm going to remember next time I come. That's it. I mean, sometimes it's that easy. And it doesn't have to be sophisticated, right? Just think about the way you're structuring things, the way you're talking about things, and listen to yourself, which is very, very casual to the words we use.
That kind of reminds me of, like, if anytime I talk to my wife, I'm like, hey, remind me to do this. I'll every time remember on my own. So it's kind of like the power of positive speaking, I guess, or something like that.
Well, oftentimes someone will say, don't forget your lunch, don't forget your sweater, don't forget your keys, or whatever it is. And you're literally programming that person to forget, rather, to remember. 9/11, you see these things, never forget. And in my mind, I think always remember, right? That's the way my mind works.
So what do you think the difference is happening in the minds of someone who is like depressed and anxious versus somebody who is just brimming with positivity?
Well, I feel like for most people I've seen anyway, right, with those two challenges, it comes from the subconscious feelings of inadequacy. And in the 14 plus years that I've been doing this, I've heard dozens of iterations on that, like feeling like you're not good enough, not smart enough, can't do enough, don't fit in, don't belong, not worthy, unworthy, not lovable, unlovable. I've heard dozens of ways of saying that. And people are so afraid of their own inadequacy, and they don't walk around, overtly discussing it, at least not most of them. Most of them are, Thoreau said, most men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them. So we're walking around with these inadequate feelings and these facades that we put on that we're okay. And I think that's really what it's about. It's feeling like you're not good enough. And if people knew that, which doesn't make any sense logically, but it's not about logic, it's about emotion. So if people knew that you were not good enough, then they wouldn't love you. And I think what people want more than anything in the world is to be loved. So that's really what drives it. And, getting rid of that for people and showing them that they are good enough, and they've always been good enough, and they always will be good enough, even with all the flaws that they have. That's really the crux of my work. And I do use neuro-linguistic programming to do that. Identifying their limiting thoughts, their limiting patterns of thought. Most of our thoughts are repeated from day to day, right? No one really knows how many thoughts we have daily. They estimate like 68,000 thoughts. No one can possibly really know, right? But most of those thoughts are repeated. So you have thoughts from yesterday repeated today and repeated tomorrow. And if you have limiting thoughts, and those are causing feelings of inadequacy, and you're feeling depressed because you're feeling inadequate, or you're feeling anxious because what if they don't like me? I think that's a common way for people to start their anxiety pattern. What if questions that they ask themselves? And then they'll project into the future that the movie fulfilling that what if question. Like, what if I can't pay my bills? And then they'll picture themselves maybe getting evicted. And they'll run a movie of that. And then they'll reset that movie and rerun the movie and reset the movie and rerun the movie as if that is the end of their life. Right? What if they just kept running the movie out through the problem into the solution? Because there's going to be one somewhere in the future. Right? That literally is a way to eradicate anxiety. I'm sorry, that's misspoke. That's a way to interrupt anxiety. It's not going to eradicate it until the feelings of inadequacy go away. It's always going to come back until we get rid of that. And that's what the hypnosis is for.
So what does NLP look like in a clinical setting?
So what I do is I visually calibrate someone when I'm in front of them or they're in front of me, and I watch them and notice where their eyes are moving. Okay, that will tell me where they're processing from in the subconscious. So if I see their eyes go up, they're visualizing, they're picturing things. If I see their eyes moving side to side, they're really listening. They're really more in touch with the sounds, right? The auditory component. And if they look down, they tend to be more processing more from their feelings. And I want to know where they're processing from because I want to know what they're feeling, not so much what they're thinking. I really don't care what they're thinking. I want to know what they're feeling. So oftentimes, I will shift someone. I'll teach them how to shift into feelings, because feelings come out of the subconscious. If you want to make changes fast, that's where you make them, right? You want to make lasting changes, make them in the subconscious. So that's one of the things I'll do, and I'll calibrate them. Now, if I ask them a question and I watch them look up and give me an answer, and I ask them the same question and I have them look down and feel for the answer, I'll often get two different answers to the same question. The one where they looked down and felt for the answer, that's the one that's going to be useful for me in the clinical setting. That's one of the things I'll do to move them forward quickly. So once someone really knows what they're feeling, then we can identify how are they creating those feelings. What are you doing in your head? And so we create strategies, and it's typically negative thoughts, right? So someone will beat themselves up, ruminate over past mistakes. And, I used to be a master at this, by the way. I could think of something I had done 10 years in the past that nobody else on the planet was thinking about, and I'd call myself an idiot and a moron for doing that, and I made myself feel really, really bad. And in the process, I reinforced this feeling I had in my gut that I could never get rid of, and it was there since I was a little kid, and this feeling told me that I was not enough. But every time I beat myself up, I reinforced that feeling. So we have to get people talking good to themselves about themselves, or nothing else works, right? The single most important thing is their thought life. If they don't change that, all the rest of the program falls apart. So that's where I start with people. I find out what they're feeling, how they're making those feelings, how they're reinforcing those feelings, and then we create strategies to interrupt those negative thoughts in real time, because you can't shut your brain off, right? Your brain's always working. So we have them change those thoughts in real time from negative to positive. And once they're doing that consistently, then the other components fall into place where, if they're feeling bad, and this is a misnomer, but they're in their comfort zone. It's not necessarily comfortable there, but they're in their comfort zone. So I have to show them, I'll actually get them to see, probably a better way to say this, that staying in their comfort zone is ultimately much more painful than the pain that the uncertainty maybe of getting out of their comfort zone, right? And then we get those two pieces in place. Then there's the guided meditation we do. That causes a transformation. Once they have a transformation, we want to make that sustainable. So at that point in time, I do, and this is not necessarily NLP, which is components of it in this, but what I do is a value solicitation with all of my clients. So I identify their top core values, and then we take a look at their rules, because even though we don't always realize it, we write rules of what has to happen in our subconscious in order for us to attain our values. So an example of that would be love love is my top core value. If I could only have one thing in life to make me happy, it would be love, right? So that's my top core value. In the past, even though I was the author, I didn't realize I'd made it very difficult for me to feel love consistently. So I had 4 different rules that I had to experience and things that had to happen in order for me to feel love. So the first thing was you'd have to tell me you love me, so I needed to hear it. And, right, you had to show me. And every once in a while, do something thoughtful for me when we weren't together, so I knew you were thinking about me. And, right, you had to have my back. So the problem being, I needed all 4 of them, or I wasn't sure. The bigger problem there is all 4 of those things were in someone else's power. So I was dependent on someone else to do those 4 things for me that they didn't even know about because they were my rules in order for me to feel love. So it made it very hard for me to consistently feel the most important thing in my world. And through the course of all this work on myself, I rewrote my rules, and they're all empowering now. They're all in my power, so I can feel love anytime I want. But that's one of the things I do with my clients, to take a look at their rules for their top core values and make sure that they're within their power. And we take those core values and we put them into a vision statement that aligns them to live congruently with their top core values, will cause them to grow, and will allow them to contribute in a way that's meaningful for them, because growth and contribution, they're the subconscious emotional needs of what has to happen in order for people to be happy and fulfilled. We have to grow as human beings, and we have to give back. If we're not giving back, we're not ever going to be really, truly happy and fulfilled. And that's the reason why I love doing what I do so much, because I'm able to give back in a way that's really, really meaningful for me and impactful for my clients.
So you said you rewrote your rules so you can feel love anytime you want. What are your rules for feeling love now?
I feel love anytime I think of October 20th, 2009, or anytime I think of my mom, or anytime I think of God, or anytime I think of or see a couple holding hands. And I wrote that one because before I had anyone special in my life, if I saw people doing public displays of affection, I would get annoyed, and I didn't want that to bother me. Now I can be walking down the street and see a couple holding hands and literally can feel love well up out of my body. It's really cool. And I feel love anytime I think of all the love that's already inside of me.
It's interesting when you're talking about the rules when you have rules that put it on other people to fulfill your needs. I've seen a lot of situations and been in relationships where someone's expecting you to give certain things to make them happy, and it ends up pushing you away from, like, it does the opposite of what they want. Like, they want love, they're expecting it from you, and then getting mad when they don't get it, and you're just annoyed at that, and it kind of puts space between them and makes it even harder to get what they want.
You're 100% right with that. It's very, very challenging for people in relationships where one partner is dependent on the other partner to make them feel significant, right? To make them feel like they're good enough. So you have to do this, this, and this, and then I feel okay. It's really not fair to the person. It's challenging, right? But you do see it quite often. And that's the cool thing about, again, I told you a lot of people get married after they leave my program in our last show. When people are feeling good about themselves, when they're able to attain love from within instead of from without, then they can get in relationships where they're really, truly successful. And I've seen that time and time again, myself included. I first got back with my wife, who I dated in 1986, and we lost touch for a long time. In fact, we hadn't talked in 10 years, and I just mentioned October 20th of 2009 is the first time I saw her again after not talking to her for 10 years. And we didn't go out on a date until the night before Thanksgiving. And within 5 weeks of that date, we were married. And we're still together today and really, really happy. So it's really very empowering to live this way. I'm not dependent on my wife to make me feel like I'm enough, and she's not dependent on me. I don't need her love. I want her love. That's a huge difference.
What does the hypnosis side of things look like? I know a lot of people think you're dangling a pocket watch telling people you're going to be happy. What does that actually look like in practice?
A couple different ways. The one that I use primarily for the feelings of inadequacy is identifying where in the body that feeling lives. Then put the person in a trance, which is nothing more than having them close their eyes and relax. And then I ask them to put that feeling in their hand and let their subconscious give it a shape and a color. And over the 14 years of doing this, I've seen all kinds of things in people's hands, some I can't even mention. But there's an organic shape that will come out of their hands. Oftentimes, it's black, like it's heavy, might be oozy, or like it's things that people don't like, sharp, pointy. And then what we also do is have them access a memory of a time they felt love. And on a scale of 1 to 10, calibrate that memory at around a 9 or a 10. And where the feeling manifests in their body, because all of our emotions do that, they manifest in a spot. And then I'll have them put the feeling of love in their other hand and let the subconscious give that a shape and a color. And that's oftentimes a ball. Or it may be a heart, like a Valentine heart, not like a human heart, right? And that's not all, but that's the very most typical thing. And then basically have to pour the one color, so it's a color, shape, size, temperature, texture, all those things, we flesh it out. Pour the love object into the inadequate object until they both look like love. Literally, this is all I do. And once they're the same, I have them bring them together, make it into one, and then bring it into their body and place wherever it belongs. And that is why I do what I do. That was done for me in 2009, and it had such a profound impact on how I felt about myself. And I do that. That's one of the reasons why I have all the Google reviews I have. I do that with every single client. And I've done it with multimillionaires, and I've done it with kids who can barely pay me. It's a universal fear. Universal, that we feel like we're not good enough. And that feeling goes away. And then the idea after that is to make it sustainable. It's kind of hard to explain the anxiety one that's called a timeline, because these are visuals, right? But time is a concept that we made up, so we represent it subconsciously in space. So I have people, again, I have them close their eyes and just from their gut point to where their future is and point to where their past. Sometimes their future might be up, sometimes it's down, sometimes it's out in front of them. But sometimes when they go to indicate their past, instead of pointing behind them, they'll point right to where they are. So subconsciously, these people are stuck in the past. So we actually move their timeline around, right? And one of the things we do at that point is we'll have them float back in time to when they first felt anxious or when they first felt whatever. And they'll float back to the first memory of anxiety and then float further back past it, or actually step down on the timeline, step back, because sometimes people can't remember what life was like before that. And take a few moments to experience what life is like without anxiety. And when they're done having that experience, I tell them to give me a nod of their head. And then we have them float over their timeline and watch themselves down there. This is exactly what I say to them. Watch yourself down there, getting yourself anxious, and watch the event play out to the end. And when it's done, give me a nod. And they'll do that, and I'll ask them, did anxiety help change the outcome of that event? And we'll do that over and over. So they're seeing themselves from outside a third-party perspective of their own behavior and seeing what a colossal waste of time and energy making themselves anxious. And sometimes, there's things that I have to do prior to that to make sure the hypnosis is effective. And that's called a strategy elicitation. And it's like 7 to 9 things that people do in their subconscious super fast that they don't know they're doing in order to create the anxiety. So we show them that without them identifying that the hypnosis isn't always as effective. But that's all it takes when people come out of that and go, how do you feel about anxiety now? And I go, wow, it really feels like it's distant from me now.
So what are your thoughts on some of the people on the internet? I was doing some research on NLP. There's some people that argue it's pseudoscience. What is your combat to that argument?
Haters going to hate, right? I mean, there's always going to be somebody that's a detractor. There's a new NLP take. It's called natural language processing. And I don't know what it is, but I think it's a spinoff of Neuro-Linguistic programming. But you look up NLP now, you'll get both of those. I can only, again, work to change my life. Over the past 14 years, I've changed hundreds of people's lives. If you want to detract, you're going to detract. I don't really want to defend it, you know what I mean? Like it's out there. And I think a lot of times you have people who don't understand it and they're afraid of it, so they attack it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you have any specific examples? Like what's some of the bigger life changes you've seen come out of the program with people through the NLP?
So, aside from the complete cessation of anxiety and depression, I mean, that's pretty profound, right? So going from, personally, I went from a 0 of fulfillment on a scale of 1 to 10 to an 8 overnight. And, people don't come to me when they're at an 8. They come to me when they're in pain. So a typical calibration of someone's fulfillment, 2 to 4 on a scale of 1 to 10 is where I usually find people. And so the goal is to get them to a 9 and to make that sustainable. So that in and of itself is profound. I mean, it's a different world, literally. And I can say that because I've been on both sides of it. But on top of that, you see people getting married, getting into happy relationships, getting better jobs, moving, making more money, doing things, right? Getting out into the world and experiencing life rather than being, I remember one guy I coached, and he said, I was in my house and I was looking out at the basketball court in my backyard, and he said it was a perfectly sunny day, and he said to himself, oh, I wish I could go out there and play basketball. And he said later to me, he didn't realize how crazy it was that he was saying that. And, this is not too out there. Like, this is common. And people do these things to themselves, and they don't even realize they're doing it. So, see him go out, and he moved to Florida. Now he's down there having like the Sarasota area, living his life. And I saw a girl who was living here, and she moved to Arizona. I still see her post on social media, got married. Another girl moved down to South Carolina. And she got married. So it's just nice to see that kind of thing. I could go on and on with those kinds of stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's awesome, Dennis. Thanks again for coming on the show. We have another episode coming up where we're going to talk about anxiety and how to kill it. So stay tuned.
Thanks again for having me, guys.
Of course. Stories from the Top is your guide to successful business development. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or find Edge of Cinema on YouTube. Stories from the Top is an Edge of Cinema production, hosted by Matthew Skura and Jeremy Schmidt. To learn more or get in touch, visit edgeofcinema.com/podcast.